Hello, all you Moon Knight fans out there. You're listening to Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ray.
And I'm your other host, Connor. And we're here to cover basically everything you ever wanted to know about Moon Knight. So sit back, relax, and get your conchu on.
Connor, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty pumped for tonight. This is our first episode.
Crazy. I mean, we've been slowly building up to this, but got everything sorted.
Yeah, before you know it, it was a lot of talk, and then just like wham, we're here. So listeners out there, who we like to affectionately call loonies, what we're first going to do is just basically give you a little rundown from both of us, who we are, what we like, and also how we know each other and why we like Moon Knight. So I'll kick off first. My name's Ray. I'm from New South Wales in Australia, and I used to collect comics in high school, and I kind of stopped around 1993. I was in the that whole 90s phase. I loved it. I was a big X-Men fan, but towards the end of high school, I kind of dropped off it. Did other things, studied, got a job and all that. But I always kind of had an affinity with comic books. So around, I think, 2000, when the X-Men movies came out, I kind of jumped on board. And I guess ever since, with the Robert Downey Jr., 2008 Iron Man, kind of back into it, really loved it. I started going to libraries, found Marvel Unlimited, started reading that. Then I thought, heck, they've got digital comics. I'm gonna collect them, and then it just snowballed into let's go let's see if King's is still around. I found King's. They're pretty much where they were, kind of in the city, and yeah, here I am collecting comics again, mainly Marvel and Valiant, a little bit of Image, and unfortunately no DC. But I hope to change that. How about you, Connor?
Well, I'm not, I'd say a fair bit up, but I'm still Australia. I'm in Queensland, Toowoomba. And I'm a fair bit younger than Ray, so when it comes down to really getting into comics, I suppose you're really looking at end of 2015 for me. I'd been a big manga reader, and a friend just kept telling me to read Ultimate Spider-Man, just kept hammering me, and I went, alright. And then dived in that and just fell in love. And I just had to read all of it. So I discovered Marvel Unlimited. And, paying what was $11 a month, I was just reading through comics. Yeah. And I just had to get on board. And,
it's a great deal, isn't it? Like $11.
Yeah, well, you got access to all of Moon Knight on there. It was good for researching this episode. And, Public Library was great for getting me into it. And how I really sort of got into it is one day just scrolling Facebook and a little ad pops up. It says, Serious Issues Comic Book Podcast. And I thought, give this a listen, and what do you know? Great first episode, and they had a group chat. So you kind of get on board that, see what everyone's picking up, and get on board, and I may have just met one Ray on there.
Yeah, it's a great podcast and a great Facebook group. It's just kind of skyrocketed in the last month or so, would you say, Connor?
Was it 1.5 thousand members now?
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Every time I look at it, it kind of shifts up by about 30 or 50 members. So that's exactly how I kind of met Connor as well. They had a nice little group chat room. And by the way, Connor is... oh my gosh, he's an encyclopedia of comic book wealth. I can't believe he started in 2015. Connor has owned a lot of knowledge on that other Facebook group, and I think everyone kind of looks towards you, for manga.
Yeah, well, being a high school student, downtime, you're just reading through, so still fresh.
Yeah, far out. And of course we both have a liking towards Moon Knight. Let me ask you, Connor, then. So what kind of make you a Moon Knight fan?
Well, going through Marvel Unlimited, he was I didn't actually know of any of his runs, but he kept popping up. Like I was reading Classic Iron Man, and there's a very famous old Iron Man issue with him, and I was like, oh, what's he? And kind of was looking through forums, and that's where there was like a getting a Moon Knight, and I found the Huston run, Houston,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And
Who knows?
I mean, just picking up that comic and reading through it, it was just such a, it was very intense, very full on sort of hero you hadn't seen before. And
Yeah, yeah.
and there's really, I mean, people might complain about likeness to Batman, and that's been an argument for years. But that time, I'd never seen a hero like him. I just had to know everything about it. So picked up those epic collections, went through his back history, and just fell in love.
And the good thing, the beautiful thing about Moon Knight volumes, I find, is that each one of them is quite distinct and quite different. You know, you talk about the Houston run, which is also, it's got to be one of my favourites. Totally, you know, quite dark, quite brutal and gritty. And then you look at like the latest volume by Lemire, which I think is now certified canon for Moon Knight, with him concentrating on his multiple personality aspects. I think it's just really great that there's a diversity there. Look, I'm just big on street level heroes myself, so I'm a big Daredevil fan. And what the internet has told me was that there are even bigger Daredevil fans out there, massive fanatical fans, which I love to see their enthusiasm for him. So Daredevil, Punisher, I love. The Defenders, I guess, and Moon Knight kind of falls in that as well. So I collected Mark Spector back in the 90s. I loved it, but looking back, the 90s is a very distinct distinct era, right? Distinct artwork, distinct storytelling. So looking back, it was good. It was a bit confusing, but really what got me on board was the Ellis, Bunn, and Wood run, which I just loved. I thought that was great, introducing Mr. Knight. And then obviously Jeff Lemire and Greg Small just cemented that. So after that, I gobbled up all the back issues. I was on a big hunt to get all the trades, which I've nearly got. And excited at the potential of the next Netflix show, potentially, or movie.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, you hear Ray collecting everything. Think of him as the proverbial Moon Knight. I'm more the Midnight. I'm the sidekick. I'm still learning this Moon Knight gig.
Well, I hope I hope you're not out to kill me then, like Jeff Wild. But no, look, I think we both just really appreciate Moon Knight, and there are a lot of fans out there. I mean, we've just got a little plug. We've got a Facebook group, which will be called Into the Night, a Moon Knight fan group or fan base. We're not too sure yet. It was originally called Fista Conchu, and I actually sent something today just to let the group members know that I'm going to change it, but they don't know that this podcast is coming out. So hopefully by the time you listen to this, you'll know why.
Yeah, someone sadly stole Fista Conchu as a podcast name a few years back, but I think we're doing pretty alright with Into the Night.
Yeah, I think it's good. Into the Night with a K. So Connor, what are we doing in this episode?
Well, I mean, I'm sure everyone coming here is a bit of a Moon Knight fan, but we might have a few that aren't. But even still, this episode, we just want to go through everything, a bit briefly, just go through Moon Knight's entire history, get set up with all the runs, characters, just a bit of everything to get you excited for what's to come and all the issues and discussions we'll be having in future episodes.
Yeah, exactly. And for the future episodes, what we hope to do is to keep you up to date with the latest news of anything Moon Knight. It's actually a bit sparse at the moment. We're all kind of hanging out for Legacy and his new title. But in the following episodes, we'll start actually looking at what we deem as a current run. So we'll revisit the Lemire run in depth, so by issue. And we'll also look at a classic run as well. So we've got something lined up there just to kind of whet your appetite for how Moon Knight was back in the day. Speculation. any news on past Moon Knight alumni like Greg Smallwood or Jeff Lemire? They all seem to be hanging around Google News.
Oh, yeah, I mean, trust Moon Knight to be the one legacy title really unannounced so far. Yep.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we've been waiting ever since. Actually, I thought he would have been announced at San Diego Comic Con, right? But
Yeah, I mean, is there any big sort of panels coming up we can look forward to?
um, New York Comic Con, I
No?
think. Just as an aside, I just saw today. Um, to do with Valiant, actually. Bat in the Sun. They'll be releasing, I think, one of the episodes for Ninjak versus the Valiant Universe, potentially at the New York Comic Con. So, look, these Comic Cons now seem to be more geared towards movies and TV shows,
Mm.
but hopefully, hopefully we'll get something with Moon Knight then.
Or Moon Knight Netflix series. We can always hope.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, far out. I want to even just do dedicate a segment to when the Defenders is out to just try and pick if we can find a cab somewhere
Cab
or
Watch 2017.
yeah, yeah. Or actually, I was even thinking maybe Danny Rand, being the billionaire that he is, might bump into a certain Stephen Grant.
Ah.
So that would be pretty cool. But you never know. So yeah. Let's dive right in. Actually, before we do that, Connor, out of all of the Moon Knight so far that you've read, who would you say your favourite writers and artists would
Oh,
be?
I mean, Jeff Lemire being so fresh just skyrockets to mind, and just what he did with Moon Knight's history. I mean, we'll be going through it issue by issue, but some of the changes, shocking,
Yeah.
changing.
Oh, it's just amazing. His other titles as well. He's just firing on all cylinders at the moment, isn't
He pumps out so many issues a month.
he?
Crazy
Yeah.
man.
How about artists? So
Um, I think to go with him, definitely Greg Smallwood. Those two on that
yeah,
run was just a match made in heaven. And I think the other sort of pairing is definitely Huston and Finch.
yep,
Just and I mean, he was definitely sort of the first one I did, so I got a bit of nostalgia there, and I think everyone loves a bit of a bad boy when it comes to comics. Like, you can never really stray away from that character type, and
yeah.
that was the kind of definition of insane, badass. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely is a really good jumping on point. I think the Huston Finch. I don't know. We're gonna have to come up with some sort of agreement as to, let's just call him Charlie.
Charlie John.
Yeah. I think that's a great jumping on point. To me, it's just so it's just so cinematic. I think. Just the opening scene, the bottom, which is the first arc of the Charlie and Dave Finch run, is just really phenomenal. So yeah, I'd have to say Charlie and Finch would be my favourites. A close second would be Lemire and Smallwood, definitely. But look, the here we go. Here's a challenge. The Munch. I think his name. The Munch run with the Sienkiewicz, Bill Sienkiewicz as the artist. I reckon they're classics. I mean, it's a different type of storytelling as well. But have you read any? Oh, you've obviously read some of that, Connor.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think I've read all of that run actually. Maybe
Yeah,
missing a few issues, but yeah, I think Sienkiewicz's art especially lives up. Just
really nice. Like especially when he gets in the later issues, he gets a bit more fluid and a bit more loose with his expressions, and it's just something that you don't really see in comics, and I think it's great.
yeah, I mean, what was it? Issue 9 of the run. I mean, so we're doing a bit of homework for you listeners, but there's a very specific set of panels and a almost like
Ah, yes,
clockwise movement of a
I
battle
know
amongst the
exactly which one.
rafters. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was beautiful. That was with against Midnight.
Mm.
Is that correct? Yeah, yeah. That was really cool. Um, anyway, okay. I think we better jump into it. We've got a lot to cover. All right. So, first thing we're going to do is look at Moon Knight's history. Okay, so I'm going to kind of start at the very beginning, but hopefully, we can get it. We can get through it. All right, so his first appearance was in August 1975 in issue number 32 of Werewolf by Night. And he initially was a villain, so he was hired by the Secret Empire, which actually I'm a bit confused because I have not read recently the Werewolf 32 issue, but I do know the Committee was another big bad corporation against
Yeah,
him.
well, I actually read it. Oh, what would it have been Saturday? So 2 days prior, and yeah, I didn't even know it was the Secret Empire. It was very much the Committee, which
Yeah.
is that a big Marvel thing, or is that just Werewolf by
No.
Night?
Yeah, I think so. I think well, it's now become very Moon Knighty, like the Committee, because the Committee comes back in the later volumes. But anyway, so he's initially hired by the Secret Empire, the Committee, to take out Jack Russell, the werewolf, basically. Um, and you'll see later on the Secret Empire pops up in the 90s in an Amazing Spider-Man run called Round Robin: The Sidekick's Revenge with Moon Knight, Punisher, I think as well, Nova and Night Thrasher. A really good series. And they also pop up again in Mark Spector. So that's about volume 3, issue 20. That's with Punisher and Spider-Man. So they definitely pop up every now and again and cause trouble for Moon Knight. So apart from Werewolf by Night, what had happened was that the audiences found Moon Knight quite appealing. So Marvel said, okay, we'll give him a bit more of a chance. And due to the popularity in 1976, he was seen in Marvel's Spotlight, so issues 28 and 29. And from that as well, in 1980, then he was granted his own ongoing series, Volume 1, Moon Knight Volume 1 in 1980. Now, we discussed about this before, Connor. There's a bit of a grey area with continuity and retconning around this, and what I've gathered was first, okay, so this might be a bit confusing for you first-time Moon Knight fans out there, but I'm sure those long-time veterans of Moon Knight will understand this confusion. In Werewolf by Night, and I think in Marvel Spotlight, it references that he was bitten by a werewolf, and that's actually given him, superhuman endurance, super strength. But in Moon Knight number 1, it's more the conventional origin story that Munch tells, right?
Even on the official Marvel sort of site where they have their own wiki, they're still talking about um, being powered by the moon, like being twice as strong under the
Mm,
moonlight. But yeah, I mean, for something so set up, the first Monek run was very sort of. He was very human. He was very still very street level.
yeah. And they've kind of returned to that now, basically. Well, the last few volumes have shown that he's pretty much just a normal guy that happens to be a little crazy, right? He
Mm.
who used to be a merc, kick ass. He was so. Anyway, also as well, what I noted was back then, in Werewolf by Night as well as in Marvel Spotlight, he still has the old costume. So Munch had and Don Perlin had designed this costume for Moon Knight, which you'll probably recognise on the cover of Werewolf by Night, number 32. His cape is actually attached to his wrists. And Munch actually really liked that idea, saying that this is kind of more practical, right? You'd never have a Superman cape just flowing in the breeze, right? You'd actually want to have it attached to something. And that obviously forms his glider cape as well. But then you look at Moon Knight number 1, and he gets his costume from Khonshu, right? He dies in the desert, and he drags himself to the tomb, and he sees a statue of Khonshu, and he grabs the garb. So there's a point of difference there as well.
Yeah, I mean, how much of Werewolf by Night is even still canon at this point? Because there's no, I suppose,
Yeah,
official documentation of what gets retconned. But
yeah. I don't think it is. I was looking at some reading some forums, and they're just saying, look, you're just going to have to accept that it's a parallel universe or a parallel reality, and disregard the statements that Marlene or or Mark refer to, because in Marvel Spotlight they refer to things that happened in Werewolf by Night, right? Um, and in Moon Knight 1 apparently they refer to Marvel Spotlight. So you're going to have to kind of detach them from each other. It's all gotten a bit messy with his origin, but I think what we're looking at now is basically Moon Knight is a merc. He meets Marlene in the desert, in Egypt with Bushmen. He gets shot. He left for dead in the desert. He goes to the tomb, and he gets revived or resurrected by Khonshu. I think that's where we're going now, right?
Yeah, well, definitely, and I think another big part of the origin was don't mess with Bushman. He was
Yeah,
one who threw him out into the desert for
yeah.
standing up against him.
He's pretty scary. He's got like sharpened teeth, right? He's filed his teeth to be kind of like pointy, and he takes a bite of Marlene's dad, Peter
Oh yeah.
Mulroon. Yeah, so he's a bit of a scary, and he's tattooed his face, as well. So he's a bit of a scary dude.
What for? Why is he called Bushman? That's the only thing I never understood. Was that his actual name or?
I think it's his surname. It's like
Okay.
Raoul Bushman. Just happens to, yeah. I think in Moon Knight, Mark Spector Moon Knight, he becomes like a general. Like in one instant, I know it's a bit silly. Again, this is the '90s and Mark Spector Moon Knight. So yeah, things get a bit silly, but yeah, that's his surname, I think, because his name is like General Bushman as well.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and anyway, around this time as well. Sorry, if I go back to Marvel Spotlight, they did try to retcon straight away that he was a villain in Werewolf by Night, but actually he was infiltrating the secret empire, so he's actually a good guy, and that's how they kind of quickly glossed over that issue of him being a villain first of all. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think most interesting part of this era is how they fleshed him out in what would have been almost 20 issues without sort of his own
Uh,
series.
yeah, it went for about 38, I think 38 issues, I think.
Yeah, and
So it was
then
quite long.
you had all the stuff before it. You had two in ones. You had spotlights. He was a Hulk
Yeah,
magazine. We'll get to in a bit. That just
yeah,
kind of fleshed him out so much as sort of a hero, anti-hero that when we finally got to that 38 issue run, he was a quite a bit different from our werewolf fighting man.
yeah. No, definitely. I mean, yeah, he featured in Marvel 2-in-1, issue 52, I think, with the Thing of all characters. Uh, and again, he was, yeah, he had no superpowers or anything like that. He had his glider cape and he had his fighting prowess, but that was about it. And then he featured in the Defenders, issues 47 through to 50. So he actually was fighting toe to toe with the likes of the Hulk, Valkyrie, Hellcat, and even Nighthawk back then as well. So he was doing his thing until he got his own series. Um, yeah, so as you mentioned, Connor, he also appeared in backup stories to the Hulk magazine, um, and further on, Marvel Previews number 20, 21, and in Marvel Preview number 20, that was the first time he was drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz. So
Ah.
yeah, so Bill Sienkiewicz is actually quite important to Moon Knight's history, basically because he's regarded as one of the best artists who kind of fleshed out Moon Knight.
Yeah, well, I think the most shocking thing I found out was that he didn't actually have a hand in creating him. That was Perlin,
Yeah,
but he sort of, I suppose, even more than Perlman, defined how he looked. That entire visual language was really him. The way he
yes.
walked, he attacked, he cape flew.
Yeah, I mean, you saw him like when he kind of his cape always kind of resembles the moon. If you look at the earlier runs, you can see that it's almost like a crescent moon, and that's how Bill Sienkiewicz drew him, which was really good, I thought. Um, but yeah, very fluid style, very nimble. I mean, you look at some of the stuff Moon Knight does in the early issues, and he's like on par with like Daredevil or Captain America, doing crazy acrobatic feats. So, yeah, Sienkiewicz definitely did introduce the cape as well. Definitely changed the look of Moon Knight. Kind of gave him a bit more of an edge, and took him out of that kind of '70s look.
So what really sort of inspired help you fill me out my little bit of patchy history as your disgruntled, well, not disgruntled, well, your Midnight. Well, he became disgruntled, I should say.
Yes.
What sort of made Monarch and Perlman create him this way? What were the influences on him?
Yeah, well, I again, we were discussing this kind of previously before. I came across this great interview with Charlie Huston Houston and Munch, or Mensch, yeah, however it is called. Anyway, basically he said that Moon Knight came about as a direct response to Werewolf by Night. So what they were looking for was an adversary for Jack Russell, the werewolf, and what do you think of when you think of a werewolf? Oh, you think of a full moon. So he kind of based Moon Knight's creation on that pretext. If you look at Moon Knight's crescent darts, which are likened so much to Batman's batarangs, no, there's a practical use for it. They're silver, and he actually used them to throw at the werewolf. Now, it's important to know back in the day as well, apparently, this was before Punisher, you couldn't use a character wielding guns, right? So the way that Munch got around it was actually, okay, well, let's have him throw crescent darts, because they're not exactly guns, they're not knives, so that kind of came about. And obviously the jet and silver, or the black and white, that came from the moon as well. And of course, werewolves are only active at night, so Moonlight became a nocturnal kind of superhero.
It's always funny to think that Moon Knight outlived Werewolf by Night.
Yeah, which is a shame, because I really like Jack Russell. He pops up. What's that run? The recent run with the Monsters. He's back with the Monsters. What's her name?
Was that
the wife of Deadpool, Queen Sheila. Anyway, he's still hanging around. I think he was also featured in Secret Wars not that long ago.
Yeah, was he a part of that Howling Commandos monster run?
I think so. Yep. And I think he was part of. There was a Secret Wars mini on Spider Island. Remember that?
Yeah.
He was actually in there as well. So yeah, it's a shame that he's gone. Obviously, the Moon Knight's better.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. Werewolf by Night was also Monek written. Did he create
Yes.
Werewolf by Night? Like he did 32 and 33, of course.
33. Yeah, I don't know. I actually haven't. There's an essential collection for Werewolf by Night. I've only read 32 and 33, to be honest.
Yeah, what you can expect from this podcast, all Moon Knight, chuck everything else away.
Exactly. We got the blinkers on here, so yeah. Also, as well, just to further on what you're asking about how Moon Knight kind of came about from Munch and Perlin. Munch didn't want he wanted kind of like an antithesis hero to the likes of Spider-Man and the Hulk and Captain America. So where you have your kind of more wholesome, with Spider-Man definitely, your kind of larrikin or light-hearted take on a hero, Munch was actually keen on creating a darker sort of hero. So that's obviously what happened to Moon Knight, and he actually got a little pissed at when Marvel started using Moon Knight with the likes of Spidey and the Hulk as well, because he felt that they weren't actually compatible.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we always got the part that Moon Knight doesn't play well with teams, no matter what the run.
Yeah.
He's always kicked off in the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Was
very
that
much a loner. So.
Was that the old 2-in-1s, or was that West Coast when it came to it? Monek sort of being a bit mad
Um,
about him showing up.
that was yeah, it was definitely the West Coast Avengers, I'd
Mm.
say, but I reckon it would have even been the Defenders issues back in the late 70s, because he does. Oh, I mean, if you read some of them, it's all very light-hearted, you know. They're in the mansion. You got Nighthawk just reclining on a couch. I don't know. They're playing ping pong or something. So it's all very kind of, this is our base, and it's all we're superheroes. I think that was totally against what Munch wanted. Um, so anyway, don't want to dwell too much on this as well. Just broadly speaking as well. So what happened with Moon Knight Volume One, which we mentioned, kind of Munch retconned the origin of Moon Knight. It actually went to direct sales, so it was actually taken off the newsstands, and was exclusive to comic book shops. I thought that was interesting. And Munch says, well, Munch has a view that it was a great thing, right? You can look at it two ways. He said it was great because with those direct sales, there were actually less ads in the comic book issues. So instead of 17-page stories, he was allowed to tell 25-page stories, and he liked that. And he said also as well, it was unofficial, but with these direct sale comic books, it was, you could tell more adult kind of tales.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you'll see, like with a lot of Moon Knight Volume One, I like Munch's writing is so lyrical, I find, and poetic. But there's a lot of tragedy, and there's a I don't know, there's a sadness to a lot of it as well, which I think is kind of very adult.
Yeah, well, I think that is that's sort of Moon Knight's big draw. That I think the most influential thing he could have done with that darker story, not made it just so bloody, was him being such a conflicted character with so many personalities. He was always, no matter the situation, there was always something weighing down on him,
Hmm.
whether it be comfortable history as a mercenary or bushman, and
Mm.
it was the real subtle thing because we still had what was it, the comic code
Yep.
that was
Yeah. Yeah.
restricting anyone from doing really anything more mature. So
Yeah.
for a character that's fairly well known for cutting off Bushman's face, or
Yeah.
the crazy fight scene in the Ellis issue 5 of Moon Knight, a lot of that early run was really basically subtlety, really. Moon Knight as a task.
Very. Yeah. 100%. I mean, like you even look at his rogues gallery early on as well, and he'd be up against just your, you know, Johnny on the street kind of drug dealer, or like that. He didn't really have a defined rogues gallery back then. He was very, very much a street level guy, and so a lot of the action was, I guess, what you'd expect. As you said, it was kind of like a bit pared back. It's not as drastic or as brutal
As
as
the
you'd see later
Punisher
on.
would, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And so anyway, just tying that up as well. So Munch was saying that it was great that it went to direct sales. They had to shift lesser units compared to like Spider-Man. And if you look at it percentage-wise, apparently they were more successful because they were able to shift 100,000, whereas Spider-Man, which published about 300,000, would be able to make 120, 140,000, which would still sell more, but obviously they had to publish more. So that was what Munch was saying, that was really good that it went to direct sales. Now the flip side of that is the reality of it, and apparently the poor sales because of the low units caused its cancellation in 1984. So that was the end of Volume One. And quickly, just to wrap up, the quick comparisons with Moon Knight and Batman. We've already discussed the many parallels, but again, Munch has said, look, they're totally different characters. Like, you only have to look at his multiple personalities to see that he's, totally different. He's got the Egyptian, mythology to it as well. He had to a tussle with the werewolves. He's got no compunction to kill, which Batman, from what I understand, doesn't kill. But the big parallel was Bill Sienkiewicz and his art, because he admits that he was a big Neil Adams fan. Neil Adams was on Batman at the time, and he freely admits as well that he kind of pinched a lot of the Batman poses and drew them into the Moon Knight issues as well. So there were direct parallels for any comic fan. Look, if you collected Batman and then you collected Moon Knight, you'd be going, "What the hell? These guys are the same, right?"
Well, yeah, I mean, not really. Still a few poses, but I think,
Yeah.
I think I don't even think the stories were all that similar back in the day.
Mm.
I think the time difference. Batman was tussling with the big boys now at the Justice League. So I think that was sort of one of the more interesting things is how I read up about the parallels at the time, and it was almost an antithesis to Batman. Batman had sort of become bigger, more technology, and
Yeah.
Moon Knight sort of took that sort of character type of the fighter of the night, took him back to the street level,
Mm.
made him a man of religion instead of science, and yeah, sort of went from there. I
Yeah.
think he's still got that to that day. I mean, no matter what happens with any run, that's still your
Yeah.
bread and butter.
Yeah, I'm happy to see him as quite different from Batman, and the latest couple of runs have shown that there's been an emphasis on his um, multiple personalities and his relationship to Khonshu, which may or may not be another dimensional character. If we're looking at the Overvoid from Lemire's run, that's almost cosmic. So we don't know where Khonshu comes from, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, sorry, that was just a bit of a delay there. My internet's
Yeah, no
being a
worries.
bit rude. Yeah, I mean, actually, and that Conchu is another thing that sort of pops up, and he was really the part if we sort of move on to Monek's very first volume,
Yep.
and sort of once we sort of started defining his sort of outfits and his appearance, um, Conchu was sort of one half of the character.
Yeah.
Particularly, Monek early on didn't quite have such a sort of grasp on, not really a grasp, didn't quite have him as such like an overbearing character that Lemire or Ellis or Charlie would redefine with. But he really, I mean, the whole thing with him being the symbol of that, and did he communicate in that early on?
With Khonshu,
Yeah.
um, no, no. I'm just going back to issue 9. I'm thinking of that where Midnight destroys the statue, and the closest relationship I can think of is Mark Spectre and Moon Knight having that connection with the statue, but you don't really see Khonshu anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, not that I can recall.
So I think if we're sort of to move on to the first volume, I think
Yep.
one of the most successful parts about Moon Knight once you had his origin was sort of that duality of a mercenary and sort of the supernatural,
Mhm.
and sort of why he became so successful was he was really sort of your hero on the street with Jake Lockley and sort of driving
Yeah.
around, but a lot of the storylines and the characters were sort of what happened with him as a mercenary. Bushman was always around. You had
Yeah.
his brother Randall Spector, who,
Mhm.
funnily enough, first appeared in that Hulk magazine. They were
It did.
really
Yeah. Yeah.
fleshing that stuff out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and sort of, and yeah, that's sort of how they brought him to the forefront of popularity. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's a no, it's a strange one. Um, look, I think we should start. Yeah, let's go straight into the volumes, right?
All right.
All right, cool. So,
So, Volume One. We've sort of gone through history, but yes, Moon Knight was a mercenary on a trip to Egypt to fight the locals of an archaeological dig,
mhm.
where he was allied with Bushmen, and Mark Spector during that sort of mercenary time was was really getting paid for it, but he still had his moral code. Bushman was just there for enjoying the killing,
Yep.
and uh, Bushman started killing locals, and their first sort of heroic oath act, sorry, of Mark Spector was defying Bushman, which from killing Marlene, which got him sent out into the desert, bleeding, about to die, when he finds statue of Khonshu under the
Mhm.
moonlight and feeling something, reaches and
Yeah.
grabs the gab. No, how do you say it? Garb. Oh,
Garb. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, and from there he returns to defeating Bushman. He returns to America to start a life of crime as the protector of the denizens of the night, as
Yeah.
Moon
So
Knight. Oh,
yeah. So I mean, what we see is Munch is basically he really wants to kind of set the reset button, and he told your typical origin story in issue one, right? Um, and then obviously he goes on to that. I think in volume one we get a lot of introductions to some of his supporting cast as well. Um, so we see one of my favourites, Crawley, who's like a hobo. Um, Always has his tea bag, which I love, and he just uses it over and over and over again. Then we see Frenchie, his ex, Merc, was it? What do you call him? A partner in crime. I don't know. He was a merc as well.
he was sort of,
Um,
yeah, he's sort of the oh, almost the oracle. He's
yeah,
always got the copter going, always feeding Moon Knight the
yeah,
information.
yeah, definitely. And you got Marlene. So yeah, issue one was really good, I think, in introducing a lot of the characters, and it's available. It's available in Epic Collection, in Volume One and Volume Two. I just want to say as well, Volume Two, you can find a review on that, on actually the whole Volume Two, which is massive, on a podcast called Signal of Doom. Um, Dave and Stu are the guys there. They do a great job in actually going through the almost 500 pages, which they read in about a week. But it is a good run. Most of it's Monk. And as well, there's Essential Collection, which is a collection of it's kind of a newspaper print, 3 volumes, basically most of the volume one run. I think all of it actually.
Yeah. Well, they
Which
haven't
is
quite collected all in Epic Collection, so
no, no. Well, I'm hoping issue three there'll be a sorry, not issue three. There'll be a volume three of Epic Collection, hopefully. So yeah, I mean, so it's great. We got introduced to a lot of characters, a lot of villains as well. So we go back to issue 9 of Moon Knight, 9 and 10 being Midnight, Anton Mogart. Again, a nice little flourish with nocturnal kind of themed characters. Midnight was this burglar that will burgle, I think, on the stroke of midnight. That's why his name is Midnight. And Moon Knight defeats him a couple of times, I think, in the volume, right?
yeah. Well, he sort of returns after being pretty badly beaten
Mm.
on sort of Foxify, which sort of once again, like going back to um, the sort of start of our conversation, what we were talking about, sort of his villains were so street level and so based down that it was really just people,
Yep,
and it was this sort of
definitely.
cause and effect. He had been the one who'd been also really badly injured by Moon Knight and returned to
Yes.
fight him.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just looking through some of the essential collection now, just some of the issues in Moon Knight. A lot of these issues are like one-offs, right? Similar
Yeah,
to Ellis later on. So you got like almost a villain a week. There was this. What am I looking at here? There's the thing where he goes to uh, fight zombies basically in one issue. Um, One of my favourite issues is issue 5, which I highly recommend. And that's almost like a horror story thing. It kind of reminded me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, some kind of psycho family. Um, and then I think in the earlier issue here, he fights like 5 assassins, and they've each got their special style. One guy's a kung fu expert, another guy's into explosives, the other one's into knives. So I think they were playing a lot with just they were playing a lot with who Moon Knight can go up against, but there was no real there's no Joker, right? If you, again we look at the
Yeah,
parallels, there's no Joker to Moon Knight. Bushman's kind of close, but he was pretty much a street level guy. He just fought anyone that was or anything that they came across that kind of committed crime.
yeah, and I mean, issue, what is it? I think, yeah, issue 8 was the one with the werewolves inside the house, and he
Yeah,
did really have that supernatural edge, which a lot of characters didn't have at the time because we didn't really have the Midnight Suns ongoing with it. So Moon Knight was sort of that, also that sort of access to that part of the Marvel universe.
yeah, yeah. It's I do like that supernatural aspect. And if anything, that's one of the things I felt. Well, it was intentionally avoided by Lemire in the latest volume. He obviously concentrated on the mental issues, which was fantastic.
Mm.
But I don't know about you, but I'm hankering for a bit more of a supernatural edge again, which
Yeah,
would be really fun.
that's my real hope with the new volume. Kind of get him fighting werewolves again.
Yeah. Well, and it would make sense as well. Again, look, if we talk about Netflix, there's talking about Blade coming in. People want to see Ghost Rider again. It just makes sense if Moon Knight's there. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Hopefully they're listening to this podcast. Someone from Netflix Studios.
I don't know. We hope, eh? um, yeah.
Um,
So,
ooh,
yep.
you
Sorry.
going?
I was just about to say as well, just another great villain that does pop up in Volume One. Oh, actually, there are a fair few of them. And we'll try to cover. We'll do spotlights on villains as well. I think they deserve attention on themselves as well. We have Stained Glass Scarlet.
Oh yeah.
She was a very interesting figure, and of course Morpheus, which total mind mind blown on him. I don't know what to say. He's a freakish character, and I think he was a great adversary for Moon Knight. What I do find about Moon Knight I really like is that, right, he's a normal dude, right? Apart from the potential effect of the moon, he's basically a guy in a cape with some nifty weapons, but he goes against some really heavy hitters sometimes, and he just doesn't care. So you got Morpheus, he can shoot like ebon energy out of his eyes, and he can do all sorts of stuff. Moon Knight just doesn't care. He'll go fight him if he wants.
Yeah, and I think he sort of did have sort of almost under issue that he was people of the night, no matter how tough.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that's very admirable from him as well. So how about Volume 2, Connor?
Well, yeah, just to sort of a final point there as well. I think the biggest enemy of Volume 1, probably one of the most reoccurring, was his mental state.
Yes.
And a big draw towards the end of the run, once Monek had sort of built up this character, was that Moon Knight's identities of Stephen Grant and Jake Lockley and his entire or tunnels, like train tunnels of all these identities, were sort of turning in on him. He was going insane, and Marlene just couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
So he broke up, and Khonshu had gone, and he was at the end of Volume 1 with the cancellation, he decided he wanted to retire.
Yeah.
So we open Volume 2, known as The Fist of Khonshu, in Paris, actually, of all places, where he's sort of retired with Marlene, and he's sort of living a life just as Mark Spector. But the big draw of Volume 2 and where it came in is just a 4-issue mini.
Yeah.
Was he got called back by Vision in his head by the priest of Khonshu.
Yeah, there were 3 of them, right?
Yeah, he basically told him that, he still had to continue his fight, and and in that run he got all equipped up with this crazy new robes and these. Yeah. I think one of the biggest ones was a sort of a cross amulet that was a dagger.
Yeah, I checked that. It's called an Ankh. Ankh. I don't know. Yeah, it's all these. Must be all these Egyptian kind of artifact things. Yeah, it's very different from Volume 1. I found Fister Khonshu. Straight away, his costume's different. He's got a whole lot of Egyptian weapons that he uses. Like he's got scarab darts, he's got boomerangs, he's got he's got these gold bracelets. He's even got like a little insignia on his chest as
Yeah,
well. I
that's
can see over here.
the anchor
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
that's the
Ank.
Ankh. Yeah, yeah. So it's very different, and the big thing with this, I think, this volume is that he makes direct reference over and over again of how the moon kind of affects his strength, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing. I've no idea whether this even stuck in canon that
Mm.
he gained basically double the power of a regular human.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was it's still in the canon, but I think it's kind of people kind of go, yeah, yeah, it happened, and yeah, it happened to him, but he's lost it for some reason, and it's never explained. So, I think they kind of, they respected this little run. Munch, by the way, he said he and Charlie Houston hate this run actually, from their interview. Only because like what it kind of did, but look, you got to give credit. The creators and the writers were trying something different. It didn't last too long. That was a direct reflection of the sales. So, it is what it is. The art's quite nice actually. I'm looking at the art. It's pretty cool. Who is? It's not Sienkiewicz, is it?
No, it's Oh, let me
Is
just
it?
pull up the
Oh, here we
full
go.
thing. It's
Yeah, Chris Warner.
written
Yeah.
by Alan Zielnitz. Never quite heard of him
Zeleninets.
doing.
No, yeah, he kind of came and went, didn't he? Yeah, and Chris Warner. It's a good, awesome art actually. I really like it. It's quite, um, yeah, it's quite textured. So yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah. Well, I
sorry.
mean, I was just sort of continuing on there that we sort of this run sort of disregarded as well because Charlie would take over and throw this away, and we'll get into
Yep.
Mark Spector, but I don't think they ever really recalled on this. But I think one of the first things this really set up in later runs, the Charlie run, the Ellis,
Yep.
Vengeance, Lemire, was actually Khonshu's presence because in this one he did actually become a figure that was actually guiding Moon Knight. You had the priest telling him what to
Yep.
do, and that was sort of that. However small this run may be, I think the fact of it did have an impact on this character. The fact that
Mm.
he did become sort of more spiritually connected.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually a really good point. Yeah, I'd have to agree as well. Because if you look at Volume One, it's not so much. But yeah, Volume Two was the first time that you actually have him speaking to some sort of deity or a higher power, and that's definitely still runs through to the Lemire run at the end. So, yeah, that's a great point, I think. Okay, so next volume is Mark Spector, Moon Knight. So this was a big run. It was one of the longest runs. It was a 60-issue run, and it started in 1989 with big writers from Chuck Dixon, who did the Punisher and did Batman as well, J.M. D. Mateus, Terry Kavanagh, and then you have some artists as well. Actually, one of my favourites, Sal Voluto. I don't know if you follow a lot of Black Panther, Connor, but Sal Voluto on Priest's Black Panther is
Yeah.
just phenomenal. I love his art. Anyway, so I was stoked to look back and see he actually did Moon Knight. You have Ron Garney, who's actually recently had done Daredevil with Charles Soule.
No.
Yeah, so he was doing Moon Knight back in the day. And then you have a couple of others, Gary Kravitz, James Fry, and the big one, which all Moon Knight fans will know, is Stephen Platt. He did, I think, 4 issues. So the last 4 issues or so of Moon Knight, of Mark Spector Moon Knight at the end. One of those issues, I don't know, it goes for a few $100 these days. It's a pretty sought after collector's item. That's because Stephen Platt did only a few issues of Moon Knight, and then he jumped onto Image when they started, because they took off in the 90s as well. So he was very much along the lines of Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, even a bit of Rob Liefeld. So he had that kind of style. Uh, what I want to say about Mark Spector Moon Knight, it's very much a '90s thing. There's actually no focus on his multiple personalities at all,
Really? Well,
or very
yeah,
minimal.
because I've never actually read this run. It's one of the
Mm.
few runs that getting back into comics, not being around in the '90s, it has never been reprinted, not even on Marvel Unlimited. It's a
Mm.
total blackout.
Yeah, that's strange. I'm thinking there's got to be an omnibus or a couple of volumes coming out soon because it's a worthwhile read. You get stuff. You get the introduction to Jeff Wild, who is Midnight, who's the son of Anton Mogart, Midnight Man, who we discussed earlier, and he comes back later. You'll see in the Charlie Houston run. What was big in the '90s was a lot of team ups. So you
Mm.
had Moon Knight with Punisher, you had Moon Knight with Spider-Man, you had Moon Knight with Ghost Rider. Even just starts, I think, in the first issue, he bumps into Black Cat. So in the '90s, it was very much Moon Knight is very much part of the Marvel universe, and they throw him in with everyone else in there. So you get a lot more guest stars. There's a couple of big things that happen. Frenchie, actually, he suffers a massive accident, one of his many accidents of losing his ability to walk. It's a bit of a recurring theme, actually. And he has there's one great issue. He has a grudge match with Killer Shrike, who's a mutant, actually, a B-list, Z-list villain. And anyway, Frenchie takes him on by himself. He says, "Mark, hang back, I got this." He kits himself up with Kevlar, and he just goes toe to toe with his mutant. And I don't know, a bit of a Frenchie fan as well. This guy, Frenchie rocks because to me, I describe him as he's a superhero. He's just as good as Mark, just as good as Moon Knight, but he hasn't got a costume. You
Yeah.
know, he's kick-ass actually. So you get that in the '90s, and then you get the tie-ins with the massive events. So events started occurring in the '90s, like you have Acts of Vengeance, which was. Are you familiar with that?
No, I do know. What was it? Was it Infinity War that showed up later? Or
Infinity War was there, yeah, yeah. Acts of Vengeance, though, was one of the earlier ones. It wasn't an event, so to speak, but it was a great crossover. I remember when I was younger. It's basically the premise was you got all these bad dudes: Doctor Doom, Magneto, the Wizard, Loki, and they came up with, okay, the only way to beat the good guys is that we've got to switch it up, So look at your Spidey rogue gallery and get his villains to fight someone else.
yeah.
Get Moon Knight's villains to fight someone else. So it was really cool. I remember one of the issues, one of my favourites was Thor versus the Juggernaut, because you'd never see them fight ever. So anyway, Moon Knight in the '90s, Mark Spector, he fights. Actually, he gets a pretty pissy one. He
Yeah.
fights. He fights this corporation called Ultimatum, with some really Z-list characters. He teams up with Punisher, and they defeat them. So it was a bit of a nothing, but he actually does bump into Hobgoblin.
Oh.
So that was a pretty good moment, and that actually defined the later end of the run, because it just expands like. Oh my gosh, we could spend so much on Mark Spector, Connor. It's really
Well, I
long.
look forward to doing that and reading it as a first time sort of
Yeah.
reader.
Okay. Well, I won't spoil it, but in a nutshell, basically, the mythology of Moon Knight is expanded.
Oh.
Frenchie's origins are expanded as well, and it gets really. All I can say is it gets really, really weird. So, Mark Spector Moon Knight definitely recommended. But also, look, if you don't like '90s comics, just take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I guess that was also the start of the Moon Knight Punisher sort of hangabout. I wouldn't call them friends or enemies,
Yeah.
just sort of, yeah.
Nah, definitely. There's actually a mutual respect there. You see,
Oh.
Punisher doesn't really like many people, right? Okay, he likes Captain America, because he admires his qualities, but Punisher pretty much hates everyone else.
Yeah.
with Moon Knight, I think there's an affinity because they're both military.
Ah,
So yeah, so he pops in a few times in this volume, and yeah, they seem to get on okay. They have a few scraps, but nothing too serious. Um, yeah, so so that ended. Actually, I don't know what year that ended. Actually, I think there was a bit of a hiatus.
yeah. Well, I think even in that, if I remember my history of Moon Knight correctly, that even the end of that run, actually was cancelled as well. That ended up
Yeah,
being another sort of cancellation, and yeah, he very much disappeared for a few years. He had two very short and forgotten mini issues that
oh
were
yes,
um what was it? Monek returning to sort of help redefine the character, but once again they're super hard to find. I don't think
mm,
anywhere ever reprinted him. And then
yeah,
of course,
yeah. So Resurrection Wars, right? That was one of the limited series.
yeah,
That was cool. And High Strangeness was the other one. Actually, High Strangeness won an award. I'm just trying to find out now. It actually won an award from something for best miniseries. So that actually did quite well. But yeah, it was a short run. Basically, it was I think it was High Strangeness. Jeez, I think it was that where he actually all his main villains got together and they try to take out Moon Knight. But we'll,
no,
we'll have to come back to that because I
yeah,
can't remember too much on that. I'm
yeah.
sure
Well,
we'll cover it.
hopefully, hopefully we get all that stuff on Marvel Unlimited soon because I'd love to check this out on the pod. Sort of.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, so we're up to now volume. Well, this is volume. This is technically volume 3. So Mark Spector Moon Knight is not allocated a volume. So this is actually the volume 3, which is the Charlie Houston run. So this comes out in 2006. And as we've discussed before, it's very different. So if you imagine the 90s, what I was just saying, 90s Moon Knight, there was a bit of a break, a couple of mini-series, and then Charlie Houston comes back here and he just guns it. Um,
Yeah, well, I guess what sort of became a popular theme with every single Moon Knight run is always sort of a reset button hit to do something sort of new.
yeah, it's quite different. And it's quite brutal, as you mentioned earlier. So in this issue, Moon Knight actually has retired. So there's been some time between the last miniseries and now. He's retired, and we look back and he's basically had this massive fight with Bushman, which debilitates him. He kind of his knees get crushed. He breaks his legs, but he still manages to kill Bushman. Not before cutting his face off. So a little grisly, but
Classic Moon Knight, I suppose.
yeah, it was it's quite grisly. I think this is the first. I think Houston is actually the one that coined the phrase "I wear white," so
Yeah,
I can
he's
see them coming. I
most.
actually thought that was Ellis, but it's actually Houston.
Yeah, that was the very first issue actually. Was
Yeah.
rereading recently.
Yeah, and it actually goes beyond that. He actually goes, I wear white so they can see me coming, and their hands shake so much that they can't even shoot the moon. So that was the original kind of saying that he had. The thing with Houston as well, again, a bit of a retcon. The background for Mark Spector's updated again, so he fought in the Gulf War as opposed to being like a merc. And also Frenchie's revealed as being homosexual as a partner as well, and they run a restaurant called Un Table, and Frenchie has lost his legs. He's got artificial legs in that. Also, we have the introduction of the profile, which some of the fans really like. What did you think of the profile, Connor?
Ooh, I mean, actually, I mean, probably to be a bit less. He probably wasn't my favorite part of that run,
Yeah.
but I think it was sort of a necessary part of that run because what what sort of Charlie sort of did with that run was very much strip him back to the basics
Yeah,
and sort of just bounce off what were the core concepts of Moon Knight and everything that he'd become. So yeah, I think that part worked well.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah, and
I think that first arc to me with is just so memorable, and
at
how
the
we see
bottom.
him, yeah,
Yeah,
reintegrate.
yeah, it's very good. And there around this time as well. There's events. So Civil War had happened as well. So you have the Superhero Registration Act, which you see kind of falls into the Moon Knight volume. And there's a whole thing about whether Moon Knight should be registered or not. They all kind of view him as a bit psychotic, so it's kind of should he even be registered? He's a bit of a loose cannon. And what happens there is that he actually tricks the psychiatrist. Won't get too much into it, but he tricks the psychiatrist into deeming him suitable for registration. So he gets registered, despite him being crazy and despite Tony Stark, I think, being up in arms against it. And he continues his way. And another thing that we have happen is Norman Osborn.
Yeah,
He really has it for Moon Knight. So towards the end of this volume, he hires people like Venom and Bullseye to try and kill Moon Knight. And well, they obviously fail. And Moon Knight ends up in Mexico. And the last bit of this volume is written by. I actually really like it.
yeah, me too.
It's written by Mike Benson.
Not
And
familiar with any of his other stuff, but yeah.
no, I think he's an author as well. I don't know. Anyway, I've got to check. We should really do our homework here, Connor. But yeah, well.
Screenwriter,
He
apparently.
screenwriter. There you go. Okay. Well, we can get into all this, in depth when
Yeah, we got
when we
plenty
go
more
in.
episodes
We
coming,
got plenty
guys.
more to go. Yeah. This is an overview. So, yeah. So his stint in Mexico again. He bumps into the Punisher. It's
Classic.
very brutal again. I love the Wrestling Brothers. They're awesome. They're good. Anyway, so Moon Knight Volume 3 with Houston and Benson. Really, really worth it. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trades of it out, but all available on Marvel Unlimited, right?
Yeah, and just to sort of bring another point in, I think it's hard to go by without mentioning David Finch on this, and
Oh yeah,
just what
yeah,
he brought to the fight scenes and the brutality and everything, the look, the figure of Moon Knight is, and when it comes down to the fact that he talks about I'm dressed in white so they see me coming, and the
yeah,
handshake so much that they can't even hit the moon, and just how he drew
yeah.
Moon Knight in that fight scene, that opening battles in the car that has them tumbling and falling,
Yes, yeah.
just
Again, very cinematic. I just love it. There's you see the motion as well. They do the post effects of making it blurred. So you get a lot of kinetic energy from the artwork. And Moon Knight's just so iconic, drawn by Finch. I find, just so. Oh man, he's awesome. So very detailed. Even does a really cool Spidey as well, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, and Captain America.
He's doing sort of on and off on Batman on the moment.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that one of the things that will probably get me into Batman. I think I would really want to dig David Finch's art again. So, if anyone can get me into Batman, it will be Finch. So, right, so next one we have Vengeance of the Moon Knight, Connor.
Vengeance of the Moon Knight. Okay, so in sort of a classic, almost, jumping from Volume 2 Fist of Khonshu to Mark Spector Moon Knight, the end of the Volume 3 with Benson and Charlie, that final Benson run where he met up with the Punisher, sort of had the, was it, sort of corporate shift of Moon Knight to, Marvel seeing him be popular and wanting him back with the other heroes
Yeah.
to make him sell again. So after that run, we immediately open up with the another reset in Moon Knight that after the crazy insanity of Charlie's and Benson's run is just returned to being this almost knightly figure, very regal, this whole new suit dressed in armor with
Yeah.
two pistols and
He's got guns.
yeah.
He's got a motorbike. How cool is that? He's rocking it, and he's got the armor looks cool. Like I'm just looking at the cover, um, by Lineal Yu. Awesome.
Yes, very classic.
Yeah, that's it's a really good run actually. He bumps into the likes of Sentry, which
He
you'd
was
never think.
Yeah, well, that was another thing. Like getting those heroes in was how it changed how he sort of
Yeah,
versed his villains and saved his allies. Where he had Sentry popping up,
yeah,
telling Moon Knight about what it means to be a hero.
yeah, yeah.
Spider Man's helping him out. Deadpool's trying to fight him.
Do you think this thing must be Sentry and Moon Knight? There's a bit of a piss take on Superman and Batman.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. There's I don't know too much about Sentry. I know he's crazy as well, right? Sentry's like totally off
Yeah,
the
well,
wall.
he's also another. Yeah, he's another character with three different sort of. I think it's not so much identities with Sentry, but three different, you know, um, costume identities living inside him.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I don't know. I just know he's pretty strong. He can fly. Yeah. Who else do we have here? And we've got the Scarecrow as well. We've got a very isn't Scarecrow DC? I think Marvel have a Scarecrow as well, but he's rarely used.
yeah.
But yeah, he's here. He breaks out some. He's got Bushman, the Hood. Um, he's got a really big dude, and yeah, and
So
Bushman's back. Yeah,
yeah, well, that first sort of half of the run is Bushman breaking a bunch of people outside of an insane asylum like the
yeah,
Scarecrow.
yep, yeah. No, it's a good run. One of the things I love about it is there's this little bit I'm looking at here which is really cool. There's a little play on Crawley. Do you remember that? He gets whacked on the head. Crawley is just usually an articulate, really well spoken hobo, right? And I think he gets hit on the head, and then he starts talking like a street. He starts talking like slang and stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
sort of the try to make him that full sort of almost hobo, sort of homeless. They really try to make him that sort of
yeah,
archetype.
but then he gets hit again, and he's back to his normal self. So, look, one of the things I really love. Oh, here we go. One of the things I do like, and he did keep it from the Houston run. Is you got Mark Spector still kind of haunted by Khonshu. So you got little Khonshu on his shoulder, and he pops up every now and again. He's kind of like the devil's advocate.
Yeah,
So he's still troubled mentally, obviously. Um, yeah,
yeah. Well, Bendis and Ellis and Lemire, I suppose, all the runs after him sort of picking up this. It's following the Charlie run that had him sort of set back down, like gone insane with insanity. This was sort of Mark suffering with an identity crisis. I think at the start of this run he only had like Jake Lockley left as an identity.
yeah, right. Okay. Oh, and then also, um, God, there's like characters galore here. You got Deadpool here, which is
Yeah,
really cool. There's a
he was
nice
a
fight with,
villain.
yeah, nice fight with Deadpool. And yeah, towards the end you have the Avengers basically. Yeah, you have Valkyrie, Beast, is there?
Well, yeah, the final issues in this tennis shoe run. I'm not sure whether it's the final one or however, but the final bit was actually to set up his reoccurring appearance as a part of the Secret Avengers.
Yes, yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
see
which
Ant-Man and yeah,
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 Ant-Man,
but
Hawkeye
yeah,
headed him in that.
yeah, and they still I'm just looking at the page now. They kind of they're kind of all huddling around each other, and they've kept Moon Knight just by himself because they just don't know how to handle him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it suffered. This era kind of suffered by the fact Marvel did try to sort of push this new sort of heroic with the Avengers sort of look that didn't sell that well. And then once he got in the Secret Avengers, that character didn't kind of gel. So he sadly got kicked out about halfway through that Secret Avengers run
Ah, right.
by I can't remember. Is it Hawkeye? I'm not sure he's on that team or like Ant Man, but yeah, they basically go, "No, you're too insane to be with us."
Ah, right.
Yes,
That's not very nice. It's not very hero-like.
yeah, and that would lead us to that whole new blank slate of dead sales for the Bendis run.
Yeah. So the Bendis run, very polarizing volume. It came out, I think, 2011, 2012. Look, we know some people that really like it,
Yeah.
and I know a lot of people that really hate it. it's 12 issues long. Look, the main I think gripe with this is that, as with a lot of Bendis stuff, he kind of disregards history of the character, which can be refreshing because it can be, look, I'm going to take this character on a new angle, but at the same time as well, it can be a little disconcerting if you really do love the character. You want him to grow. So Bendis, yeah, really takes creative license with Moon Knight in these 12 issues. Look, I don't mind it. I think it's all right. It comes after Shadowland, so Moon Knight appears in Shadowland, which was, I think, a bit of a failure as well. Have you read Shadowland?
Yeah, well, that was massively hated, and I
Yeah.
suppose that kind of rubbed off on me as such a new reader to everything. I
Mm.
kind of disregarded it, but I think we should definitely give it a whole new look back, especially since out of
I think so.
everything, the Moon
Yeah.
Knight run on it was pretty celebrated, actually.
Yeah, and the fact as well, if you look at the Netflix shows, Daredevil, I think they take a lot from Shadowland as well. It
Yeah,
just seems like, he hasn't gone bad or anything like that, but there's a whole hand side of things, so it's definitely, not disregarded. But the Bendis run, yeah, look, the first thing I'll say is that towards basically, if you look at the very end, so the whole thing about Moon Knight being a lone solo hero, trying to work it out himself, and for 12 issues or 11 issues, he tries to do it. He has some small successes, but he fails. Then what does he do? He calls the Avengers, and bang, it's over. They defeat Count Nefaria. They basically, you know, put the queue up in the rack, and they solve the. Uh,
yeah. Well, I mean, that was another strange part. How how did how did you feel about the identities in general? Because
I thought it was a fresh take. Oh, look, having Spider-Man. There was a reveal as well of them being the personalities at the end of
yeah,
the first issue. That was pretty cool. I don't know if it was cool, or if it was like novel.
yeah,
Just for the sake of doing it. It, on a marketing point of view, you've immediately got Wolverine, Spider-Man, Captain America in your book. Regardless of if they're real or not. So it was a bit of a sneaky move by Bendis to do that. But yeah. Look, I didn't mind them, but I'd much prefer Moon Knight being the way he's meant to be.
mm,
How about yourself?
yeah, yeah. I mean, Bendis run I don't have much memory of, except I really did love Echo in that run.
Yeah,
And
Echo's
yeah,
good.
yeah, another one I look forward to looking up on this podcast. But for all listeners,
Yep.
the new deluxe hardcover collecting all 12 issues is actually
Oh,
coming out
yes.
fairly soon. That will be a nice way to read up on that and recapture.
Yeah, you can just read it from beginning to end. It'll be in one big run. Yeah, look, for new Moon Knight fans, those who want to get into him, uh, I certainly don't not recommend the Bendis run. I reckon give it a go. Judge for yourself. But it is, again, a very different run from all the others, and as I said before, that's the beauty of Moon Knight. Every volume is different, and you take it as it is.
Which then, I guess, leads us into the whole new reset button of Moon Knight
Yes,
with the
exactly.
17, 16 issue. Can't believe I don't even remember that.
Oh gosh, good point. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 17.
17. Live research on the pod.
Yes.
With the Ellis Wood, Warren Ellis, Brian
Mhm.
Wood, and Cullen Bunn run, each doing about 6 issue arcs,
Mhm.
and it was a whole new era after that massive Bendis shake-up. And what the run set out to do was take him directly back to the streets, take him back to all those personalities, all the street fighting supernatural crime, and that's where we got the whole new inclusion of the new personality, Mister Knight, to ground us
Yes.
back in the world. So Mister Knight was he's pretty big now in the Ellis and Lemire
Yeah.
runs, but he's a new detective style personality of Mark
Yeah.
that essentially works with the NYPD.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. With
in
Detective Flint. Yeah.
Flint, yeah, in fighting crime, and he sort of uses that character to take us back to the streets to see how Moon Knight's Mark's dealing with everything, and what sort of what this whole run was about was sort of once again sort of tearing back Moon Knight and focusing on specific bits. So like the original Monek run, this was very one shot.
Mhm.
There was sort of no real chronology until the very end of with Bond, but it sort of took an aspect, an identity, a villain, and that one issue refleshed it out.
Yeah.
And it was sort of it was very much a new entry for readers, and that Moon Knight was a whole new personality to attach to. That was
Yeah.
more successful than Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Cap.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And I think we've mentioned before as well, I think what really makes Ellis's 6 issues really great is Shelby's art.
Oh, it would have been nothing without that art. Just
It is phenomenal as well. So, look, Moon Knight seems to attract a lot of really good writers and artists, or I don't know, it might be sheer luck, but Shelby's, again, highly recommend. You have a look at the first 6 issues. It's quite violent, and it's quite trippy as well. There's the issue with I don't know how to explain it. There's a lot of mushrooms, a lot of floating around, Alice in Wonderland kind of stuff.
yeah, that an exploration of a haunted mind in a
Yeah.
fungus-grown man.
You also have, as well, the introduction of his other costume, which is the more Egyptian Khonshu
Yeah,
costume. And that's pretty cool as well. I've seen a few photos of people cosplaying that. It's quite a
very
popular thing.
impressive. Yeah,
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 it's
too.
not. Yeah,
Oh no,
sorry.
that was all.
Oh, I was about to say it's not very practical, but but it's pretty cool to look at. Um, yeah, so I actually enjoyed. Apart from Ellis's, I did really like the Bun run. I think there was a lot of really good stuff there. There was some whacked out stuff. There's this like woman here at the end. God, what's her name? She. Can you see that? Oh, I'm just showing showing
Yeah,
Connor a picture there. Really weird. She's on these little bloated pustules of creature. But it gets really whacked out. He fights the boogeyman, the
yeah.
boogeyman, which is really good. And yep, just a lot of violence, which is fun, which is fun as well.
Um,
You just gotta love it. So yeah, no, a really good run. What would you say? Would you say out of the three riders, is there a connecting tissue between?
well, it was sort of um, Ellis and Wood were very one shot. You know, they were sort of. It was and why it was popular. It was such a celebration of Moon Knight. They took like one bit of Moon Knight, an aspect, an issue, and explored that. But they put enough little bits, hints of story that when Bunn took over around
Yeah,
issue 10, that he used those last issues to tie up the narrative with sorry, the very Honshu based plot, and
yeah,
there was a bunch of threads about a church of Honshu and someone trying to take over that church that reevaluated what we knew of Khonshu and very much explored that more. I think no run before this had ever had Khonshu as such a prominent figure.
mhm, yeah. It's yeah, very good series. I think it's yeah. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
It's really it's really good. Readily available
yeah.
Marvel Unlimited, as well as you can get the trades. They're still around. I'm hoping actually that there's a some sort of hardcover or something of it. I think that'll be really cool to get them all together.
Oh, for sure.
But they do work on their own, like Ellis, Wood, and Bunn. So yeah, so definitely check it out. And then finally, look, we're going to be covering most of this, well, over the next coming weeks, but we finally come to the latest and last volume for Moon Knight, which is the Jeff Lemire, Greg Smallwood
Hmm.
volume. So I don't know, how would you describe that, Connor?
Um, well, I think sort of, you know, they sort of stripped him away to look at every part of him, but Lemire very much took Moon Knight as a character and completely deconstructed him.
Mm,
You know, it's very much sort of a look inside the mind of Moon Knight, what makes Moon Knight, and it's this very mental, subconscious based look at
yep.
Moon Knight, and it's
I,
very
I
hard to explain without going issue by issue, but
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, what I like about it is that ambiguity between.
yeah.
It's straight off the bat of okay, has he made it all up? Like, is this reality? Him in the asylum, and has all these adventures just been a figment of his? I love that beginning with him in the
Oh,
asylum, and you not knowing. Like, it's funny because like we go through all the past issues, and then you're up to volume 6. You're reading it, and immediately you're kind of questioning. Hang on, yeah, is it true?
yeah.
So, and then it just gets whacked out with the Overvoid, which is apparently the place where Khonshu and like-minded deities come from.
Yeah, well, I think Khonshu in this run actually sort of became almost Moon Knight's Joker, almost that big villain.
Mm,
He
yes,
in
very
himself,
much.
yeah, he actually became a full blown expanded character that
Yeah,
stood against. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, similar to some of the, you end up kind of really hating Khonshu. I don't really like Khonshu at all. At first you read Moon Knight, you go, okay, Khonshu's cool. He gave not resurrected him. Um,
CPR on the ground.
yeah, resurrected him, but like, no, I think he's a bit of a dick actually. He just, what does he really wants to suppress, and that's the impression I get in this series. He wanted to really suppress Mark, and just keep him kind of under his thumb.
Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely worth check out. Look, the great art as well. Smallwood is, I think, peerless at the moment. He's just fantastic, doing great stuff. Not only with the artwork, but we've had many a discussion about the layouts and Geordie Belair actually.
Yeah, shit. Well, I mean, she's really the unsung hero of even the previous run, where she did all the colors of all 17
Mm,
issues, I think.
yeah,
And her with Smallwood's just the perfect match of making these layouts, these for a book that's exploring the subconscious, just these completely dream-like, crazy layouts that they just perfect.
yeah. It's the amount of work that she does as well. Her name is on practically every comic book you see. It's crazy what she gets through, but to not only do that, just the quantity, but the amount of time she would have had to consider how to color. What kind of tone we're looking for with Lemire's story. It's just phenomenal. Not only that, but there's in the middle arc, I think, where each of Mark's
Yeah.
personalities are reflected with different artists. I think that's a stroke of genius. So you got. Did we ever find out who that third artist was? So,
I
so
had
you
him
have
up.
yeah. Let's have a look. So you had Greg Smallwood, obviously was the main guy. You had Jake Lockley, who's a cab driver. He was drawn by Francesca Francavilla. Really nice. I don't know what you call it, noir.
Mm,
The colours in that is hard to describe. A lot of reds and blues and yellows. It's very very noir. Then you have James Stocco doing the weird, wacky werewolves from space
yeah.
component of Moon Knight. Uh, again, what would you call that? Like kind of indie underground kind of art.
Yeah, well,
Um,
yeah, it was sort of supposed to be, Stephen Grant's own film.
yeah, right, right. Yeah.
Fredo Torres was the third
Ah,
artist.
oh, right, okay. So Wolfred, he had a really nice, clean
Mm.
look to his Stephen Grant world, basically. The dapper kind of part of Moon Knight. So yeah, I really, highly recommend the Lemire run, and not just saying that because it's the newest one. It really is an important, I think, arc for Moon Knight, or sorry, volume for Moon Knight overall. And I think there's so many ways that you can actually go from where Lemire has left Moon Knight. So again, look, they might just set the reset button and and we get something totally different again. But look, it's definitely worth checking out. So yeah, I'm happy with that.
Well, that's really taken us up to current day. We're still waiting
Yeah,
for this new announcement of the new creative team, and
yes,
next week we'll be diving into the first issue of Lemire, so we won't
yep.
go
So
too
we'll be
much
doing.
onto that.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be doing that. We'll also be potentially looking at a classic run. We'll figure that out. I'm kind of looking at the Marvel preview actually.
Mm.
I think that's a really nice story to kind of get your teeth sunk into. One of the earlier runs, I think from the 70s. And also we'll just cover news, and we'll keep a close eye on anything TV or movie wise, as well as the creative team. This is what we're kind of sweating on. So yeah, so hopefully we'll have something for you. Hopefully, next time we see you.
Yeah.
So yeah, any final words, Connor?
No, I'm just very excited to finally have this out here and have all these loonies on board for our crazy dive into this world and all the issues, news.
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. And look, you can catch us at Into the Night. Just have a look for Into the Night, a Moon Knight. I haven't even figured it out yet. What should we call it? Into the Night, a Moon Knight fan base, or a Moon Knight fan group.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, look, I'm going to change the name. It's if you get on it to it before it, by any chance, and it's still the Fist of Khonshu, just look up Fist of Khonshu. Otherwise, check out the Facebook group, which will be called Into the Night. We also have an email address. Let me just pick that out.
Moonnightpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us
Excellent.
on the site. You've probably most likely gotten this from
Yep.
moonnightpodcast.wordpress.com.
Yes, actually, I think that's changed. I think it's
Oh,
Into the Night podcast. .wordpress.com. So we'll be posting up all the podcasts from there as well. And yeah, we also have a chat room. It's called the Looney Bin. So I don't know if you can find that, or if you have to join the Facebook group first to get in there. But yeah, glad to have you with us. And yeah, we'll definitely see you next time.
may Khonshu watch over the travelers of the night. Goodbye, everyone.
Catch you later. See ya.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.